On March 18, 1984, the head of a major Japanese candy company was kidnapped naked from his own bathtub. What followed was an 18-month reign of terror that involved poisoned candy, hundreds of taunting letters, and a criminal mastermind who outsmarted an entire nation's police force. To this day, the identity of the monster with 21 faces remains completely unknown. It began in Osaka, Japan. Katsuhisa Izaki, president of the candy company Izaki Glico, was enjoying an evening bath when two masked, armed men broke into his home. They kidnapped him, naked, and held him for ransom. The very next day, a note demanded 1 billion yen and 100 kilograms of gold, the equivalent of $10 million today. But 2 days later, before any ransom was paid, Izaki managed to escape, work his ropes loose, break down a door, and flag down help. He had no idea who his captors were. You'd think the story would end there. It didn't. The group, now without their hostage, simply changed strategy. They threatened to poison Glico's candy with cyanide unless they received nearly $500,000. To prove they meant business, they reportedly snuck into Glico's headquarters and set company vehicles on fire. This was happening in a country where police were remarkably effective. In 1983, Japanese police solved over 97% of murder cases, but this case stumped them completely. One newspaper editorial at the time stated that criminals had never made such fools of the police before, and the criminals knew it. In April, the press received the first of what would become over 100 letters sent over the next year and a half. The tone was almost mocking. One letter began by calling the police idiots, taunting them for needing so many officers, and then, almost helpfully, offered clues about their car and where they bought groceries. Another letter dared police to catch them, joking about kidnapping the head of the police department next. By June, the group started signing their letters as the Monster with 21 Faces, a reference to a children's story about a master thief of disguise who always warned his targets in advance just to prove his skill was unbeatable. It was a chillingly accurate description of what authorities were now dealing with. In September, a second company, Morinaga, became a target. They received extortion letters demanding over $400,000. When they refused to pay, newspapers across Japan received a deeply unsettling letter. It taunted parents directly, claiming their candy now contained potassium cyanide and that they had planted 20 poisoned boxes in stores from Hakata to Tokyo. That same day, poisoned candy with handwritten warning labels was discovered in stores nationwide. In total, 18 packages were found. At least one contained enough cyanide to kill. Thankfully, because of the warnings, no one ever consumed the poison. Investigators eventually obtained grainy security footage of a suspect placing something on a store shelf. The man, known only as Video Man, was never identified. Disturbingly, phone calls demanding ransom payments were also traced, and the voices on these recordings weren't hardened criminals. They were a woman and a child, calmly giving instructions for where to leave the money. For over a year, the Monster with 21 Faces evaded every trap police set. When companies attempted to deliver ransom money, the group would simply never show up, correctly assuming officers were waiting in disguise. In one instance, after police dressed as businessmen failed to make contact, the group mockingly wrote that they could spot undercover cops immediately by their, quote, shifty eyes. By 1985, over 31 food and candy companies across Japan had been targeted. Police had received nearly 28,000 tips and deployed over 130,000 officers. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the group announced in their final letter that they would simply stop. So who was behind it all? There are three theories. The first suggests it was an inside job, possibly orchestrated by Izaki himself. This theory gained traction simply because people found his escape suspicious, but it doesn't explain why his own company suffered massive financial losses, including a complete shutdown of production and the layoff of 2/3 of their workforce. The second theory points to revenge. Decades earlier, in 1955, a contaminated batch of Morinaga baby formula accidentally poisoned over 12,000 infants with arsenic, killing 138 of them. By the 1980s, survivors of that tragedy would have been adults, potentially seeking revenge against the company that harmed them as children. But this theory struggles to explain why the group targeted dozens of unrelated companies instead of just Morinaga. The third and most compelling theory centers on a man named Manabu Miyazaki. During one ransom drop attempt, police spotted a suspicious man with distinctive narrow eyes, who they nicknamed the Fox-Eyed Man. He escaped on foot, but police later found the stolen getaway car, complete with a police radio scanner inside. A composite sketch was released to the public, and it was so accurate that even the suspect's own mother reportedly recognized him instantly. That suspect was Miyazaki, the son of a known organized crime boss with a history of arrests. But despite the identification, no charges were ever filed. Miyazaki had an airtight alibi, and no physical evidence ever tied him to the crimes. Years later, after the statute of limitations expired, Miyazaki published a memoir about his life of crime. The cover featured the exact same police sketch used to hunt him. In the book, he confessed to numerous other crimes, but he never once admitted to being the monster with 21 faces. In total, Japan's candy industry suffered massive losses, with national sweets consumption dropping by 10% in a single year. Some companies lost more than half their annual sales. And yet, the people responsible were never caught, never charged, and never identified. Even now, decades after the statute of limitations has expired, no one has ever come forward to claim responsibility. What do you think happened? Drop your theory in the comments. And if you want more cases like this, subscribe to Mystery Minute. We'll be here every week, digging up the truth.